Instantly, it's pitch dark and freezing cold again. "Oh my God, what have I done?" you say, shaking and terrified. "It's okay," says Matthew calmly. "Did you notice that Asha led us down a trail that got us off the plateau? We're on level ground now. It will be slow going, but we can't fall off a cliff, so we'll make it. And even though it's cold, my core temperature is warm now. Is yours?" "Yes," you say, pulling your sweater tightly around you. "We're really not that far away from our campsite, don't worry," says Matthew, taking your hand. "Even if we don't make it back before light, at least this way we can keep moving. We'll be all right, I promise." Matthew suddenly stops and says, "Amelia, look." He turns you slightly, and you see a bright white light appearing out of the darkness. "Oh my God, it's a helicopter," you say excitedly. "Is it your dad?" "It must be," says Matthew, staring at the approaching lights. "Do you think he'll see us?" you say breathlessly. "Well, there are no trees nearby, and my father knows how to do a sweep. We just have to stand here and wait," says Matthew confidently. As you stand patiently waiting, the helicopter appears brighter and sounds louder than you would have expected. Finally, the light sweeps across you, and a large helicopter lands on the flat, sandy ground about 20 feet from where you're standing. But instead of Matthew's father emerging, 2 soldiers jump out of the doorway, dressed in standard military flight suits. "Are you both okay?" yells one soldier over the tumultuous sound of the chopper blades. You and Matthew both nod vigorously. "Come with us," he yells. Ducking down, you and Matthew run with the 2 men, and you're both helped inside. You climb in between 2 rows, 4 seats in each row facing each other. You and Matthew sit facing forward with both soldiers directly facing you. One of the soldiers, a man in his 50s with a square jaw and intense dark eyes, indicates that you should both put on your headsets, which are hanging above your heads. "You're okay now," he says confidently as he nods his head. "How did you find us?" says Matthew, speaking through the attached microphone. "We just kept looking," he says. The helicopter rises swiftly into the air and then spins around nearly 180 degrees and begins flying in the opposite direction. "Are you taking us back to our campsite?" asks Matthew apprehensively. "No, we have other instructions," says the soldier loudly. "What do you mean, other instructions?" asks Matthew, still somewhat concerned. "We're headed back to the hangar, that's all I know." Then with a slight smile, he adds, "We're just the rescue team." Relieved, Matthew says, "Is this a Black Hawk?" The soldier smiles and nods. "Yep, it's a UH-60. You look at Matthew and he smiles at you. "I know a bit about helicopters," he says, shrugging. "I'd say so," you say, returning his smile. In silence you fly for half an hour or so, but you're really not sure about the time because there's nothing to see except the interior lights reflecting off of the windows. Finally, the helicopter drops straight down as if it's about to land, but instead it seems to be flying slightly above the ground. You still can't see anything, but you notice the sound seems to be echoing back to you, as if there are walls on either side of you. You want to ask Matthew if he knows what's going on, but you feel self-conscious knowing that the soldiers can hear you as well. A few minutes later, your questions are answered when you land. As you climb out, you see that you've flown directly through a massive man-made tunnel, and you're now in an underground hangar, surrounded by walls reaching up at least 50 feet high. "This way," says the dark-eyed soldier as he and a couple of others accompany you to an electric Humvee. You look anxiously at Matthew. "Where are you taking us?" says Matthew cautiously. "I don't know, kid. This is just a hangar," says the man. "You'll be taken to someone who will explain everything." He then holds the Humvee door open for you. Cautiously you climb in, look uncertainly over your shoulder as Matthew follows and sits next to you. A driver is waiting, along with 2 armed soldiers in the seat behind you. All are dressed in black jumpsuits and wearing headsets with microphones. The moment the door closes, there is a clicking sound as it locks automatically. You have an uncomfortable claustrophobic feeling, knowing you are now locked inside with no way out. The vehicle moves to the opposite end of the hangar and sits silently idling in front of a pair of thick, wide metal doors, spaced a few feet apart from each other. Hovering in front of the doors is a bright yellow hologram that seems almost like clear glass, displaying the word "Caution" in bold letters. A moment later, the yellow band of light disappears as the doors raise slowly, revealing a deep, wide cavern enveloped in darkness. The vehicle plunges into the abyss and past high rock walls. The exterior darkness only amplifies the eerie sound of wheels droning against strangely smooth pavement and the air whooshing ominously by as the walls climb higher on either side of you. You lean against the window, stark still and about to panic, when you notice the darkness above seems to be changing. You can't quite make out what is happening, but you see ridges and strange shapes where it was smooth before. Points of light begin to appear, multiplying by the moment, becoming brighter, as if you have just driven straight outdoors. You are astonished to realize you're seeing an azure sky filled with clouds overhead, and the strange shapes are actually buildings at least 4 stories high. The soldiers are communicating through their headsets, but you can't make sense of what they're saying. Leaning toward Matthew, you whisper in his ear, "How is this possible? Where could we be?" Matthew holds your hand, shakes his head and replies, "I have no idea. But we didn't fly for very long. We'd still have to be somewhere in the Utah desert." "Could your dad have anything to do with this?" you say nervously. "No, my father isn't involved in the military. At least not that I know of." Needling points of anxiety prick you from within. As your body begins to tremble, you take long, deep breaths, willing yourself to stay calm. You want to talk to Matthew, but the fact that the soldier sitting behind you might overhear anything you say causes a feeling of panic to rise up from your chest and tighten around your throat, censoring anything you might say. Uneasily, you focus your attention outside of the vehicle as you travel down a well-planned grid of wide streets that seem to have been designed specifically for transporting large machinery and building materials. Suddenly, the drab gray buildings are bathed in what appears to be real sunlight, and you are stunned by the feeling of warm sunshine on your arm. As you drive, weaving in and out through a quiet whir of electric vehicles, you are both frightened and fascinated. Without knowing why, you try to commit as much as possible to memory, but soon everything is a jumble as you move past large interior spaces, unbelievable in their size and complexity, and on to the center of the city. You drive past a park where wildflowers dot the grass with little bursts of color. Overcoming your fear, you whisper to Matthew in astonishment, "Could this be a military base?" Speechless, he only shakes his head. Along the roadside, trees sway green and leafy, with birds singing and flitting about in their branches. Rustic-looking wooden footbridges spawn creeks and waterfalls. And then just as you decide there couldn't be anything more surprising than what you've already witnessed, you pass a wide opening where you see a theater towering 30 feet above a sports arena, as if the theater was some type of strange giant peering over the top of the stadium intent on watching a game. When you leave the city, everything seems like an endless system of tunnels and security panels that flash from red to green as you pass through computerized checkpoints displaying security cameras. You can't fathom the size and scope of the facility, not to mention the fact that it was built in secret. You pass a freshly dug tunnel with a surface so smooth it appears to be glazed. Inside the tunnel, a boring machine moves at a snail's pace, like a huge steel-encased worm. Next, you pass sealed tubes containing shuttles and passengers, and a sign that reads, "To Los Alamos, Connections, Area 51, Page, Arizona, Creed, Colorado, Carlsberg, New Mexico." "Did you see that?" you whisper as you glance over your shoulder to see if the soldiers are listening. But as far as you can tell, they aren't showing any interest. "What?" says Matthew, staring back at the signs. "Those signs. Are they military bases?" you say, puzzled. "Not that I know of, except I have heard of Area 51. Matthew pauses and then whispers into your ear, "Maybe they're secret underground bases." "This can't be good," you whisper, shooting Matthew a fearful look as you drive along a large corridor covered with signs and universal symbols rather than words printed in plain English. "I know," Matthew whispers tersely. "Why would they need universal symbols rather than signs in English?" A bright green light flashes above large elevator doors as they slowly open. Your vehicle pulls inside, and you immediately notice security cameras looming overhead. You descend 2 levels, then your vehicle drives slowly down a passageway that stops at a hospital entrance. Once inside, you're quickly escorted down a large hallway that leads to a separate wing of the hospital, and on into what appears to be a common room. You notice several men and women sitting around the room in green scrubs as one of the soldiers walks up to the nurse's station and she points down the hall. "This way," he says dogmatically as he leads you to a conference room and opens the door. "Take a seat. Someone will be with you soon." You and Matthew walk hesitantly through the door and sit next to each other at a long, dark wooden table with matching padded chairs. Though you're alone, you whisper, "What are we doing here? This is obviously some kind of top-secret facility. Why would they bring us here?" Then grabbing Matthew's arm, you say, low and guarded, "I know this sounds like some kind of conspiracy theory, but what if they don't let us out?" Before Matthew can answer, a woman in her mid-30s with dark, short-cropped hair and hazel eyes enters the room. Unlike most people in the facility, she is wearing a business suit, a white shirt with a black jacket and pants rather than a military jumpsuit. "My name is Trevor Tulney," she says briskly as she sits down across from you. "I'm a civilian, but I do live and work here. I'm sorry I wasn't able to meet with you sooner to explain what's been happening and why you're here. Last night at 2200 hours, a synchronized series of terrorist attacks took place. The immediate damage has been caused by nuclear weapons detonated on the San Andreas fault line in the San Francisco Bay Area. But 2 other areas were also targeted: Yellowstone National Park and a relatively unknown but very vulnerable part of the Utah desert not too far from here." You and Matthew stare at each other in shocked disbelief as she continues. Your teacher and the students in your class were safely evacuated. But by the time we found you two, this facility was the closest and safest place we could bring you, due to the threat of an imminent eruption. We were able to detect and stop the attack on Yellowstone, but obviously not the attack here. I've never heard of an active supervolcano in Utah, says Matthew, looking at her skeptically. The Utah caldera has been dormant for over 600,000 years. But just like Yellowstone Park, it's been an active hotspot for a while, says Trevor, the tone of her voice making it clear she doesn't appreciate being questioned. Until last night, our geologists believed the Utah caldera wouldn't erupt anytime soon. So no reports were published in an attempt to protect businesses that rely on tourism. However, after the underground detonations occurred, we found asphalt melting for 30 miles along a road that runs directly across the caldera. Now, there's a chance that nothing will happen, that it will just be a hotspot, but we need to wait until we're completely sure before we send you home. But we saw trains and signs for destinations that are far from here. Couldn't we just take a train and get back home from there? Asks Matthew. Lockdown means no one goes in or out, says Trevor, seeming more like a hardened military officer reminding them about rules and regulations than the civilian she claims to be. We can survive indefinitely in this facility, but we can't handle the influx of thousands of people who would want to take refuge here. Does that mean our families are in danger? You say anxiously. At this time, your families are fine. We'll get word to them that you're both here, and I'm sure they'll be relieved to know that you're in the safest facility in the world, says Trevor, in a failed attempt to lighten the heaviness in the room. But what if we could just talk to someone in charge and convince them to let us leave? Then could we go to another base? I mean, I saw a train leaving when we were coming here. I am sorry, says Trevor, in a tone that is slightly more human and less like an automaton. It's just protocol. There are no exceptions to the rule. The train you saw was just transporting people to other parts of this facility. How big is this base? Asks Matthew. It's big. Now, there's no need to worry about anything just yet, says Trevor, with a strange intensity that belies her unspoken suggestion that you both remain calm. We can live here underground until the threat is fully assessed. In the meantime, we've already received an influx of personnel. So I'm afraid this hospital psychiatric ward is the only place that can accommodate the two of you at the moment. But there's no need to worry. Don't worry, Matthew blurts out. This place is massive. You're telling us that the only 2 beds in this entire facility are in a psych ward? Seriously? Due to current events and the massive influx of personnel, every bed has been taken, and as you may well imagine, says Trevor, looking directly at Matthew as if she is daring him to ask more questions at his own peril, your personal accommodations are not high priority at the moment. Our hospital beds are already filled with the sick and injured. No one in this ward has ever been violent. I promise you, everyone here is completely harmless. Many are just here because there's no one to take care of them, and this is all we have to offer. Trevor then continues on as if you are military recruits in boot camp rather than a couple of scared teenagers completely out of your element. You're safe, but you'll both be here for a while. So when we're finished, a nurse will give you a brief physical exam, and then you'll be given ID cards and scrubs. Tomorrow, when we have your weight and measurements, you'll receive military-issue clothing. You'll each have your own room. You don't have to worry about being in a psych ward at night, she says, putting the word psych in finger quotations. All doors are locked, and you have your own intercom and staff members who are always available in case of an emergency or if you need to go to the bathroom. Sleeping pills aren't required, but if you have trouble sleeping, you'll be given non-prescription pills. In the meantime, both of you are now part of this community, so you'll take aptitude tests. Then you'll either be placed into job training or you'll be given further testing as it becomes clear that you have a specialized talent or ability. Wait, says Matthew impatiently. You're telling us that our country is in the midst of a massive terrorist attack, and you want us to take aptitude tests? Are you kidding? Young man, says Trevor flatly, no one here is entitled enough to sit around watching events unfold on television. Everyone is trained, everyone has a job, and everyone works. And since neither of you showed up with a job application in hand, you are going to take aptitude tests so you can work. Now, have I been clear enough?